get to Zlatan Ibrahimovic. The initial prognosis at the time of taping from coach Jose Mourinho is it looks fairly negative. That's what he's saying. Also, Marcus Rojo looking fairly negative. We'll come back to that. First of all, United making fairly heavy weather of this, Steve. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think you could say, listen, again, they made tons of chances, no question. They were the better side by far. It should have been comfortable, though. And, of course, when you go ahead and then you lose a goal and all of a sudden you start getting the jitters, you start thinking, oh, dear, we've completely dominated this game. We've let the opposition back in. This could go horribly wrong. They deserved it in the end. I'll tell you what, there was a few holding their breath.
Mourinho will be very disappointed with the finishing tonight. They did break Anderlecht down numerous occasions, but the finishing in front of goal was not the best. And everybody was guilty of it. But as Stevie says, they should have been put to bed. Well, they should have been put to bed in the first leg. Never mind about tonight. But they totally dominated and just squeaked home.
Now let's be honest. Anderlecht, come on, it can't complete 2 passes. And we're evaluating this objectively. We're watching this team and we're thinking, how is this team going to score the goal? Somehow they get a deflection, a rebound, eventually they get on the end of it, they score the goal. But they didn't seem like there was an opportunity for Anderlecht to really threaten Manchester United. To me, this is all on Manchester United and their inability to consistently, once it gets to the point to where you need to put a team away, to do it. To be able to execute in the final third. For as much as people want to love on Marcus Rashford and say the positive things about him after his performance on the weekend against Chelsea, well, you have to be able to finish your chances.
Should they have kept the same team?
No. I bet they wish they'd kept the same team now because Ibrahimovic looks
easy to say
in a little bit of trouble.
In retrospect, but
and if you're a side who can't finish other than Ibrahimovic, and they don't have him, how are they going to get themselves in the Champions League? Whether it's in the league or whether it's winning this tournament.
I think Mourinho, if he's saying it's not looking too bad, when you look at that in slow-mo and you freeze it, it looks terrible. It really looks a bad injury.
He said it looked a fair degree of negative is what he actually said.
I have no idea what that means.
He probably doesn't have much of an idea right
now. But when your knee hyperextends like that the wrong way, it's not good.
Gruesome, didn't it? I mean, you guys were just
and also Rojo's injury looks.
Yeah, well, he said both of them look a fair degree of negative.
Yeah, but in the big scheme of things, if you've got a choice of losing Rojo or Ibra, I mean, it's not even a competition. This is huge for them because they need this guy in order to get in the Champions League next season, whichever competition it is. They cannot finish their chances, and as good as Rashford looks, he is not the finished article. He had 3 one-on-ones with the goalkeeper and never got close to scoring tonight. Hit the side net and hit everything but the goal.
Rashford did score the winner, though. Let's give him that.
Well, he did, but
it took him
5 opportunities. That's not good enough. When it comes to the crunch, you need to rely on somebody, and without Ibra, he can't rely on anybody.
Here's the point, though, Adrian. For a team that struggles with scoring goals and creating opportunities to score those goals, Marcus Rashford cannot have 5, 6 chances in order to score one against Anderlecht.
And better tell the English media that, because they are anointing him the next big thing.
Where's the English media? I don't care about the English media. See, I don't care because to be honest with you, I don't care if Marcus Rashford does well or not. We're evaluating the player from what we see, and when you miss one-on-one situations, as good as he may be, as talented as he may be, right now he's not better than Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Right now he's not the finisher that Zlatan Ibrahimovic is. So you need a player of the quality of Ibrahimovic to be there in order for you to have a real opportunity. Now, Marcus Rashford better come up with the goals now because there's nobody else in that team that's going to score the goals.
Now, no qualified doctors here on the desk, I believe. No. So, again, right now, and we're talking in the immediate aftermath of the game, and so we're only speculating. Zlatan, if he is done for the season, what does it mean for United?
Well, you take Zlatan's goals out of United this season, and what are you left with?
Not a
You're
lot.
left with a team that is not even close to the top 4. And really, can they win the Europa League without a guy to put the ball in the back of the net? Because without him, they don't have anybody you can rely on. As bad as the opposition probably.
And the other side of the discussion is what does this mean for Zlatan Ibrahimovic at Manchester United? Because if indeed this is as bad as we think it is, then why do you take a chance on Zlatan Ibrahimovic in the future if you're Manchester United? It may just be the end of his time there.
At 35, Paul,
Look, it doesn't matter how old you are.
Nothing's easy to come back from.
You don't. No, I mean, look. I mean, we've all had fairly bad injuries in our career. That's a bad injury, and I think who's got to step up is Mkhitaryan. He looks as though he's the most clinical finisher of the group that's left. You know, you can't really rely on Rashford. You know, when you're getting into the sharp end of the season and when the big games are coming along and it's tight in the box, who's the guy that's going to finish? For me, it's going to be Mkhitaryan.
The problem is you have to define what an era is and at what point does it end. It's the end of an era in the sense that Luis Enrique is going, so in that sense it's an end of an era anyway. It's the end of an era in the sense that this has been, I think, the confirmation of something we've been seeing all season, which is a Barcelona side that, in fact, that goes back beyond just this season, that doesn't have the same identity that it once had, that isn't rooted in the centre of midfield, it isn't rooted in control and possession in quite the way it once was. It's been focused much more on the front three, and that this season, the extraordinary season, and it really has been an extraordinary season of Messi and indeed the other two forwards, although Suarez has been a bit off of late, has kind of disguised some of those structural flaws. So that could be seen as the end of an era. Obviously, you've also got the fact that at the end of the season, we still haven't seen real progress on the renewal of Messi's contract. Andres Iniesta dropped very, very heavy hints before this game that there's a chance that he doesn't continue at the end of the season. So in that sense, yes, it's the end of an era, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Barcelona now suddenly collapse. I mean, a side that's got that front three and that's got Piqué and Umtiti and Ter Stegen has the makings of a side that can continue to be one of the best in Europe, of course.
very spirited debate on this subject last night on the show. Dan and Craig getting into it. Where do you stand, Ali? Is this a major turning point for Barcelona?
They have to make decisions in terms of personnel because it's a team that is flawed. And when you look at the results that they've had in Champions League, when have you seen a Barcelona team getting destroyed 4-0 like they were against PSG, or 3-0 against Juventus, or unable to score in 2 consecutive games against Juventus? The magical game that they had against PSG disguised some of these flaws, and people thought, well, there is something special about this group. There is something that they can turn it on, and they're going to be able to run through this Champions League. They'll show you that in the first half, as they did against Sevilla, when the front three were running all over the place, and you thought, man, if they play like this team cannot be stopped. Here's the thing. That doesn't cover up the structural flaws that Sid is talking about, the midfield that does not control the games. We've known Barcelona to control the pace of a game with the possession of the ball and possession in advanced positions. They can no longer do that with consistency because they play really only on the left-hand side of the field. They ignore the right-hand side of the field because, by the way, Dani Alves is not down that side. Sergio Roberto is not an option down that side. So everything they do funnels to that left-hand side, and eventually they run out of space, they run out of possession, they run out of chances, and if Messi, Suarez, or Neymar doesn't do anything special, this team is not advancing forward.
There is an argument out there, Stevie, that Barcelona are simply too big now, too rich, too powerful to have a downturn for very long. Oh, by the way, they still have Lionel Messi.
I'm not so sure. Listen, I think the word the guys were arguing about was decline, and there's no question they're in decline. You can't go from being the team that everybody's shooting for to be to where they are right now. There's no question they are not the best team in Europe by some way. And regardless of the amount of money they have, they've tried to spend money, particularly in the middle of the field. They've tried to bring in Turan. They've signed Gomez. They just have not been able to replace the quality they had. Busquets, Iniesta and Xavi, when they were at the pomp, they haven't replaced it. And when you don't replace that, you cannot expect to stay where they were.
So it's the end of a cycle. You lose the coach is gone. I think that was most certainly a disruptive influence on this group. But to Stevie's point, I agree. It's about the recruitment of the players that are going to let Iniesta have a little rest now and again so he can keep his leg fresh. And Busquets, Rakitic, and on. So that's the next issue for this Barcelona side. Yes, they've got the nuances of still a very, very good team, but it's the players that are going to come in the summer that is going to define the next cycle.
And Sid, they've regenerated, haven't they? They've been the end of previous cycles in recent history. You think of when Pep Guardiola left, of when Samuel Eto'o and Ronaldinho left. Those downturns weren't for very long. However, you go back to the Dream Team and Johan Cruyff, and there was a downturn for 7-8 years after that. What are we looking at here, do you think?
Well, I think that filters into an important point, which is that Ali was talking there about that they need a renewal of personnel, that they need to get new people on board. I think there's something perhaps a little bit deeper, and I don't want to kind of talk in nebulous terms or try and make this something big and airy, but fundamentally they lack an idea now. They lack the clarity of identity that they've had, a philosophy, if you want to use that word, that they've had in recent years. And Luis Enrique, even when they won the treble, there was a slight hint of that. There was a hint that they weren't quite. They didn't have the same identity as before. The question mark, of course, is can you have that same identity without Xavi? Can you have that same identity with an Andres Iniesta who's physically perhaps declining and you can't find necessarily the replacements for that? But I think they've managed the recruitment very, very poorly. I think they've managed some of the institutional evolution very poorly. And I think fundamentally that comes down to perhaps a slight lack of ideas. And the reason why I say that's made more pertinent by your point about the long decline after the Johan Cruyff era was because they changed ideas. They lost direction as a club. It wasn't just that, right, some of these players got old and moved on. It wasn't just that Cruyff fell out with the board and moved on. It was that they went into a period of not being sure what it was they were trying to achieve. Now, some of their ideas were maintained. At youth level, for example, the structural ideas that were taught throughout the youth system were more or less maintained and more or less intact. But at first team level and at institutional level, they were somewhat chaotic. And I think that's really where this sits now, that Barcelona need to get an identity back and be very, very clear about what they do, and from there build according to that idea. But I think they are too big to be a disastrous team because they've got really good players, but maybe not the very, very top. Bear in mind, this isn't a one-off. The last 4 years, 3 of those 4 years, they've been knocked out in the Champions League quarterfinals. Now, it's no disgrace to reach a Champions League quarterfinal, but for a team like Barcelona, it is stopping considerably short of where they believe they should be.
Good record for Atletico Madrid when it comes to the Champions League knockout stages. Their third semi-final in the last 4 years. In fact, when you look at what they've done in the last 4 seasons under Diego Simeone, only Real Madrid have been able to beat them. It's quite remarkable. Sid, you know, when we talk about the best coaches in the world, you know, the names of Mourinho and Guardiola come up consistently, but looking at what Atletico have done, particularly in the Champions League, ought not Diego Simeone to be right at the top of that list at the moment?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, look, it's very difficult to judge coaches who manage at different clubs in different circumstances and so on. But I think if the measure of a good coach is taking into account the resources that he has at his disposal, taking into account the quality, the size, the ability of the opponents that you're taking on, taking into account the situation of the club that he goes to when he takes over. I think what Diego Simeone has done is absolutely extraordinary. I remember talking about this when they reached the first of the Champions League final, and then again when they reached the second of them. And bear in mind that Simeone comes to Atletico Madrid, almost gets them into the Champions League positions in the first season, wins the UEFA Cup, the Europa League. Second season wins the Copa del Rey at the Bernabeu against Real Madrid, the first time they'd beaten Real Madrid in any game for 14 years. The third season he wins the league title, winning the league title with a 1-1 draw at Barcelona against Barcelona on the final day of the season. Gets to a Champions League final, loses it to a last-minute goal. Gets to another Champions League final 2 years later, loses it because of a penalty that hits the post. It's that close. I think you can go back over history and say, in terms of an immediate impact at a club, in terms of revolutionising a club and completely changing the way that club sees itself, the way that club can progress, the way that club can kind of build a new identity, Simeone may well be right up there with literally no one bar Brian Clough in history. I can't think of anyone else. There might be other examples, but that's the only name I can think of a manager who's had that much of an impact on a club.
Team of the year, 8 players out of the 11 are from Chelsea and Tottenham. That's understandably so this season. Yeah. Paul Mariner joining me with this one, and there's a couple of things he can't understand. Some big absentees, like a certain Zlatan Ibrahimovic, maybe the top man at Arsenal, Alexis Sanchez.
Yeah. Look, Lukaku, I have my viewpoint on Lukaku. The higher he goes, I think he'll struggle a little bit. I don't think he's got the touch and the right mentality for that. But look,
he's been scoring.
I was just about to say, he's carried Everton to a certain degree, scoring, I think, 24 goals. You can say the same thing about Zlatan. Zlatan's played a lot of football, scored 20-odd goals this season, been quite remarkable. it's difficult to see a PFA team with no Aguero in and no Sanchez. And I know Sanchez, everybody said, oh, well, he's down tools a little bit. And to a certain degree, he has. He's not been as sparkling, but he has carried Arsenal for most of the season. I have a little bit of an issue with the two central defenders, Luiz and Cahill. I think they've been good. I mean, Luiz has really surprised me. He's been better than I think everybody thought that he would be in that slot. I sort of look at Alderweireld and Vertonghen. I think even Van Dijk, before he went down for Southampton, I thought he was playing very, very well, and I think he'll probably get a big move in the summer. But overall, it's not a bad.
Sounds like you want a completely different team, though, say for David De Gea, Maris.
No, not really. It's just, you know, can you find a centre half or two that's better than those two? Possibly. And I just think it just doesn't look right with Lukaku up there. No Sanchez, Ibra, or Aguero.
All right, thank you so much, Paul Mariner. So basically, he wants to change the entire squad, save for the goalkeeper, but that's what the PFA chose.
He's not bad.
Hang on, let's see if this O.J. Simpson thing on Netflix is any good.
Yeah, it is quite good, mate, but now's not really the time. Yannick Bolasie is more into the spirit. He's been creating the type of memes your uncle might send you in an email chain. So, hala Rayef! This chilling picture captures the moment Ronaldo noticed the linesman had fallen asleep and urged his teammate to pass to him in an offside position. Ancelotti tried to complain after the game, but the ref pointed over at what he said was a brightly coloured parrot, which he knew was Ancelotti's favourite type of exotic bird. But by the time Ancelotti had turned around to look, the parrot had gone. And so had the ref. Gerard Piqué summed up the situation thus: forgetting that creative refereeing was how his team got to the quarter-finals in the first place. Barcelona had an uphill task against Juventus and tried all sorts of tactics to get back into the tie. Ter Stegen got himself caught up in his own goal netting to try and lure Juve onto the attack, but they resisted the temptation, and the match was abandoned early when Neymar burst into floods of tears. He sobbed for half an hour until Dani Alves' shoulder became a swamp. Then Cuadrado came along. I don't know, attracted by the salt or something. Nobody needed to be G'd up in the Leicester dressing room. Craig Shakespeare simply brought this man in to see the players before the game, pointed at the tattoos and said, look, this is what you're playing for. Unfortunately, it backfired. The players looked at the man in confused silence before Christian Fuchs spoke up. Why haven't I got any eyes, he said. Craig Shakespeare replied quickly, because we've got blind faith in you, Christian. Blind faith. What's the dog about, said Mark Albrighton. Look, ignore the dog, replied a visibly angry Shakespeare. The dog was there originally. Just ignore the dog. The players performed below par that night, apart from Jamie Vardy, who really likes dogs. And finally, what a team Monaco have. They have a very successful system at the club, if at times eccentric. They always have to have someone employed who looks like Arsene Wenger, and youth thrives as a result. Kylian Mbappe has no significant weakness, apart from occasionally getting cold armpits. If he can find a way to keep these heated during games without restricting his movement, he has the potential to be a world beater. Back to you.